I always
Share.
press the right buttons, Roland. Don't worry.
That's a lie, and I can prove it.
I press all your right buttons. Oh.
Well, I'm glad that we could clarify that.
Fair and fair. Let's record an episode.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland Voigt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlandson. Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. I'm excited to start off another wonderful episode with you this season. I gotta say, this season of What's Your Baseline is going to be our most exciting yet, and I'm already having so much fun. How are you doing, my friend?
I don't know, man. For all the Germans who listen here, it's a typical German November day. You know, it's gray, it's rainy. We're waiting for an Arctic cold front, and I'm just like, On the not so bright side is I don't have to manage the light coming from the window that is sitting in front of me. You know, so you see all my wrinkles now in perfect depth.
So it's a typical German day, which means it's sad and dreary, just like your soul. Oh,
haven't you heard?
You can find joy in little things. You can take that gray light and turn it into a bright, wonderful light by putting your heart into it.
JM, black, dark gray, anthracite, medium gray, light gray. What is that called?
I would say the German rainbow.
The German rainbow, yes.
Oh, Roland. Well, that means we need a little bit more encouragement today, a little bit of joy, a little bit of pep in our step, which is why we brought a really exciting guest. Tell me a little bit more about our guest, friend.
Yeah, so we're talking today about BPM community, and I just made up that title on the fly. But we have a bright spot in our recording with Hanneke Loefs, who's wearing, for those of who are on the screen, on the video, on YouTube or wherever, wearing a very nice pink top, which looks so much better than the black that JM and I wear. Hey, Hanneke, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Yes, thank you for being in the show. Yeah, very well. For you, it's morning, but I'm in the Netherlands. So for me, it's almost evening. And it's also a bit of a grayish day. So,
you got a German
but I wear pink.
Too?
Pink is the new black.
I'm going to keep that in mind for future seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to have a great conversation with you today. I mean, totally transparently, Roland and I have been watching along as you've been doing some great interacting on LinkedIn, helping to be a social and contributing part of our BPM community. We thought it'd be a great opportunity to bring you on, have a conversation with you about what that means and how to cultivate that and how to turn that into opportunities for folks to grow and to find BPM in their own homes and hearts. But before we get started with that, I'd love for us to sort of get an introduction to you and for our audience to learn a little bit more about you, what you've done before, and why this is so important to you. So please tell folks all about yourself and where you come from.
I'm Hanneke. I was born in the USA, but I live in the Netherlands now. I live in the city of tulips near the Keukenhof. So we have a lot of tourists coming over to this little village. I'm married with 3 children, happily married. I love running. I play the violin. And my background is in finance and operation, from early stage startups to large corporates in a variety of industries, in a variety of disciplines. So I'm a bit all over the place. But I learned about, that's me, still figuring out life or a career, but enjoy doing it. And 2 years ago, I learned about BPM, and I thought, hey, this brings together everything I've done. So why didn't I know about it earlier on? And why don't other people know about it earlier on? I was a bit amazed because I started on LinkedIn, and people were engaging with me and reaching out to me, drinking virtual coffees. And then I post a message like, who are you? BPM enthusiast. And then even more enthusiasts reached out to me. So I drank a lot of virtual coffees. And all over the world. I hit every continent twice or 3 times. And there I found out, this is actually a very small community, because I come from finance. We have, countless finance people, and there should be countless process or BPM people, but it feels like it's a niche or emerging new technology. That's amazed me. It's like, it's new.
Yeah, it's a very good question, because as we all know, BPM under various names exists for, I don't know, hundreds of years. If you think about it, think about industrialization, Taylor and Ford and all those guys, they must have thought in processes, right? And then there's the concept of the 4 waves of BPM. Don't want to go too much into detail, but there are things like business process reengineering in the 90s, throw everything in the air and assemble it new in value chains, or you have all the lean folks and whatnot. And then now I don't know which time we are in today,
Well, BPM may have been around for a long time. It's one of those best kept secrets, maybe, of the industry for a very long time. It was resigned to the more technical parts of it, the people who are really in the nuts and bolts and nitty gritty of business operations. And as a result, a lot of people were left out of the conversation. Now that we see a lowering of a barrier to entry for people to get into tools, we see more conversations about process and architecture spreading across organizations. We've now opened up the doors. We've let folks to come on in and provide fantastic, valuable feedback, timely feedback to BPM teams, and even become part of them. I think that's incredible to sort of see the discovery path for people as we change as a discipline who we're looking to work with. That's fantastic.
JM, is it? I think you and I are biased because we work in that space for so long. But Hanneke, I'm really curious about your experience as the newbie here.
Yes.
What were your experiences? How did you get to this? Well, you said you discovered BPM, but how did you get to that discovery? And what was your impression? And where do you see the potential? And share your wisdom.
Yeah, well, I worked during a carve out, and I had to make a landscape of all the actual processes. And then I looked for a tool to do that. And I found Aris and I looked into it. And there I learned about the process house, the process architecture. I have a financial background, but also a background in process optimization, Six Sigma. So I'm also a black belt. So I know that part, and in quality management, various parts. But when I learned about the process architecture and where you can use those Lego blocks, I call them, where you define the processes in a structured way, you can reuse all these Lego blocks for end-to-end and various scenarios. I was like, wow, this makes sense. And I do see the struggles and the challenges because I'm a newbie. I'm also critical. Well, that's my middle name, Hanneke Critical Loefs. I'm both enthusiastic, but I also feel we're definitely not there yet. I see that we want to democratize it, but we're not there yet. There's a lot of challenges to go through. But yeah, there's a lot of hidden potential in it. And I'm amazed nobody actually knows about it. Or when they know about it, then they are like, ew, we usually work around those process people kind of thing.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that at length in the second part of this episode here. But maybe to come back, where do you see or have you seen BPM? Because I know you worked in large organizations, in small organizations, in new organizations, in old organizations, all over the place. Where have you seen BPM being applied, institutionalized, and maybe more importantly, where haven't you, and why is that?
Well, to be fair, I haven't seen BPM from early stage to very, very large corporates. So I do see process initiatives. I was a black belt at Schiphol Airport, but they didn't know BPM back then. And also worked for a commodity trading company. They didn't know about BPM. So, but they do know about processes. Everybody knows about processes, but they don't know about the process architecture. That's the hidden gem, I think, which is new to everyone. So I reached out also to operational excellence people or anybody I thought they know about BPM.
So do you make the distinction between process within a silo? You know, if you're doing your Lean Six Sigma project, right, you're looking at one, whatever, value stream, one process, whatever, right? And then you're done, right? And you move on. Do you make the distinction between this process and BPM in the way that you say, hey, there's tons of those processes and there must be a combining structure of those, you know, I don't want to say business architecture, but that's what I basically mean, you know, where they all fit in. Is that your observation?
It's two things. It's next to improving, which is all the Six Sigma initiatives, it's also that full cycle of monitoring and documenting, governing. That's additional to what I've known. And indeed, the architecture. That makes it powerful. And if I may say a third, the integration with other disciplines, which we are not quite there yet. It's still not perfect, but there's a lot of potential because, I also work for risk management, audit, internal control. They can all gain from that same repository. That's what I see. Everybody is doing their own thing, not just in a supply chain, in the silos, but also in the supporting organization. Like you have internal audit, risk management, all doing their own stuff. And it's not only me. I've talked to a lot of BPM enthusiasts, and they're telling the same.
I'm going to see how this comes together, right? So you're talking about what it takes to maybe bring a BPM mindset to organizations that haven't really thought about that or thought about it in that way. When you look at trying to establish the need for a BPM mindset, tell me a little bit where you look to and learn from, and how do you start that conversation in the case of legacy companies and introducing a BPM mindset where they may not have had one before, or in terms of startup companies, how to get them thinking about process earlier in their growth cycle before they get so big they have to, for other sorts of things like regulatory compliance reasons. Tell me about that introduction process.
Well, the last big assignment that I did with BPM implementation, it started with a problem. So they had operational challenge, excellence problems. They were in a growth phase. And that's perfect because in growth phase, you have a growth pain, and then processes come around the corner. Because if you don't do anything about it, you become too complex. And it started around a process organization, but in the back of my mind, I knew, okay, but it can also include for the finance department, internal control. It can do so many things. So in the background, we already start with this process architecture. The people in the organization don't know upfront about it because they're not interested in it right away. That will become later. But explaining the value of a process architecture, that helps. And for later on, it's like your foundation. You can do process projects, but what do you do after that? Because when I started there were already like Visio drawings, but as everywhere, they were outdated, far too complex, no standardization. That's pretty much how it is everywhere. And then you can explain. So if we put it in one database and use the same conventions and put it in a structure and govern it, then you will have the value of it later on if you want to change a system or whatever transition you will be in. So it makes you agile, but people have the other feeling with it. So if you say processes, everybody is like, I don't want to become a bureaucratic system. and I'm living and breathing startup mindset. So I do understand that worry. but I have on my forehead, I do cherish your autonomy. I do cherish your agility. I want to increase it.
So that's very interesting. And obviously GM and I are biased because we work in that space for quite a while now and have seen one or two customers that we sold some software to in the past, GM, if you remember. But what were your experiences when you pitched that? Because I can see that, when you say, oh, no, we're agile, we don't need this. Oh, yeah, the Visio is good enough. No, I want to just have that process improvement thing, or I want to do that process, whatever you want to do, single activities. What was your pitch, or what is a pitch that you've seen being successful to an organization to say, hey, we need to do this in a more structured way. We need to put a little bit of formalism around this. Oh, and by the way, you have to open your wallet and spend some money for it. What were your experiences on that?
Yeah,
because I see people being reluctant to that, especially the last part.
Well, I named it in the first conversations, and then they were a bit like, we don't need it. We need something different. We have a problem, and we want you to help us with that. And then I named, okay, you can implement a BPM structure. I think you need it with all the other challenges you have. But it wasn't right from the start, but they grew into it. And I was very lucky. They were very open to it, I have to say. What I notice now, because I'm explaining it to whoever wants to hear about it, and I'm surprised, the reactions. Everybody's like, I have a financial network, so I'm telling it to whoever wants to hear it, or investors, like they have a 100-day plan. So perhaps you not only want to fix stuff in those first 100 days, but perhaps you want to make a sustainable improvement for when you sell it in 5 years, which most investors want to do. But that's still a bit, they have to get used to the idea. They just are not familiar with it. So I think it will take time. But it starts with the problem, and don't mention the BPM word right from the start. Don't mention it. Yeah, don't mention it right from the start. But you need a problem. They need a challenge, and you need to know how you can solve it with BPM in your toolbox. But in the end, it's just a tool. So I like to look at it as a holistic method. It's not just the BPM architecture, but it's also just take a look at the organization. What's the meeting structure? What's the organizational structure? Are the resources well placed? All that kind of thing. And it ticks all the boxes. It's not just the architecture, it's the whole.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I wish everybody good luck on that journey, to pitch it to the people holding the purse. But thinking about our pre-conversation, I thought you had a nice term where you said, hey, you can use it as a method for transitions, and you called it a carve-out.
So that's where I learned about it. Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So on one side, you can use it for operational excellence and quality management systems. But on the other hand, it's a very powerful tool for carve-outs. So you have, in a traditional carve-out, you have a target operating model, and it's a few bullets, but two of them actually include process landscape and the IT architecture. And you go from the as-is situation before the carve-out, and you want to go to the to-be situation, like where you go in the merger situation. And then from the process architecture, you can map it like, okay, you have the same sales operations in the new, like we will have in the new situation, or the same payroll. It's just a carve-out of systems, but everything will stay the same. Or the whole supply chain will change, so we have to map that again. It's a very powerful tool to make the first setup and to discuss the integration.
Like the carve-out scenario means that you have a justification for proceeding down a more formalized process architecture path, a BPM path, because you want to understand the scope of the effect of this and how you're going to transition to that new way of working. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
That's good. And
perfectly
it
right.
gives you the reason to do it, right? It makes you push through some of the organizational or cultural barriers that might prevent you from helping to introduce a more rigorous practice around BPM. And you can also, I'm assuming, show some of the value in advance to talk about our planning process is going to be more streamlined. And you can talk about the value afterwards to say that this becomes our new steady state that we can grow from. So we don't have just like deliverables we've handed in. We actually have a new model that we can innovate and iterate on, built into a business architecture.
Exactly that, because the assignment to me at first was just do processes standalone. And well, don't go into that. And then I learned about ARIS, and I thought, well, we might want to build something for the future. So I changed gear, went to another other person to report to, and I said, I want to build to the CFO, and I said, I want to build something for the future. So I started in the transition team, which is a very logic place to start. But I changed to the CFO and I said, I want to build something for the future. This will be your foundation, because during the carve-out, you're not optimizing processes. However, it's not black and white, but you're just designing, making the best of it. You're just thinking, what will it be? But it's like big steps to come home. And after that, when you cut the cord, then you can start optimizing, fine-tuning processes. But that's after the carve-out. So don't do it all in once. So that was exactly my idea. Like, okay, perhaps if the assignment is just processes, perhaps we can put it in an architecture that it's actually of value after the carve-out. So there I learned, like, okay, we should do this with every carve-out.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's a really good topic for people to ruminate on a little bit, to think about in a brief break. It's fantastic to hear your experiences, in particular, helping to see how BPM and a process architecture can be a transition for people's mental sort of framework that they're working on, how they see process in their organization, particularly in organizations that are legacy, that haven't had a chance or a reason to think about that, or organizations that are new and in a growth mindset, these lean and agile startup companies for whom BPM is not a rigorous practice yet. And I want to turn this back to our audience and ask a question. Talk to your organization. I mean, many of our followers on What's Your Baseline are practice leads for BPM organizations, but think about when you started. What organizational experience did you have? Was your company set up for process excellence, or did it have to be introduced? And as a result of what? Was it a project? Was it a carve out, like Hanneke said, or was it some other catalyst that brought you to a level of process architecture more than just putting boxes on the page? We'll leave you for a moment and then come back with our second section, all about BPM and the community.
Baby, you ain't no shooting star. You ain't as good as you think you are. There's no shame in giving up. You'll be happier in the long run, 'cause you ain't no shooting star.
And welcome back. Hey, Hanneke, fascinating conversation so far. I think it's getting better, because one of the things that I really, really like is you look at the topic of BPM with a set of fresh minds. If for those of you who haven't noticed this, I think there's some feeling of enthusiasm coming out of Hanneke's words, which I really, really like. And then old farts like JM and I, who've been in that space for quite a while, we don't have that new car shine anymore, right? But from your perspective, I'd be really curious, and that's obviously the meat and potatoes of this conversation is BPM community. And from what I heard is, I think you discovered there's a lack thereof, right? So I'd be very curious to get your opinion on, is there a way to bring the practitioners together? And if so, how would you see that?
Well, there isn't a lack of community. I would say there is a very true community, but it is very, very small. I wouldn't expect it to be so small worldwide. for such a big topic. And yeah, I am enthusiastic because I see the potential, but I also see the challenges and the way we still need to go.
Hanneke, can I maybe rephrase that then? That we see that the community we could have has not been brought together around BPM, perhaps because they don't know about it. Well, or perhaps they have a misconception of it. So to tell me a little bit about that, and in particular, I think about this as like a technologist question versus a practitioner versus an end user and community member.
Yeah, so there you define the difference, because in my head I was like, what are you referring to? Because you have the practitioners, and are these the designers or the end users? And the community now is built around the designers. So the heavy tech, you like to call yourself the nerdy guys. I love nerds, to be clear. But I feel a passion in the community, but also they feel a bit like undervalued, slightly frustrated. And I think it's both ways. Yes, they are undervalued in the community. And it says something about, okay, perhaps we should think about the value we bring with BPM, because we're not there yet. Because in the end, the higher you get, the more stupid you get. I haven't said it, but
the air becomes more rarefied, and therefore thinking is a little bit harder.
Yes, let's put it that way. But they're actually executive are very simple. Does it bring me value or not? You can talk fancy about it, but does it bring me value or not? It's either yay or nay. And I think up till now, it didn't bring the value people were hoping for. And I feel that we try to make that transition with the tools and the mindsets towards the end users. So I feel that energy. But I hope that we can monetize it, that we can bring the value we hope we are aiming for.
So why is that? So I'm putting on my vendor glasses now, right? The way how I think about that is, you have certain use cases. Quality management, system implementations, risk and compliance, whatever. Because I need to plan my development. I need to get my arms around a thing and say, okay, hey, I break this use case down in those features and whatever, right? And then I come up with, if I'm lucky, I come up with the methodology and the necessary documentation and training and whatnot, but it ends at some point in time. So where do you see then the missing gap to create that value?
I think we were a bit over enthusiastic in the BPM field, like drawing BPMN models for every single process. I don't think it's needed. I love BPMN. Let's be clear about that. But I don't think you need BPMN for every single process. I love the thinking of, somebody called it derivative processing. So just mention the target, the system, and the responsible person, and that's it. Figure it out yourself. That could work as well. You don't need detailing for everything. And the other thing is, it needs to be very user-friendly. So the functionality, I think that's the UX design, and the look and feel, that's the UI design. I like to think in colors, so I need colors, pictures, and frameworks. Actually, I just read the book of Kevin Tan, and I'm in his. I like the way he's thinking. I think we can take even a step further. Make it more, how would you say, shiny? Like it's not that boring process modeling that you look at and like, okay. And he is already thinking about how can we make it easier to digest. And I would say, how can we make it even more fun to digest? Because now everybody is transferring it into PowerPoint and redrawing it. Because that's easier to digest. And that's so frustrating. Why would you do that? I understand that people doing it because it's easier to read, easier to digest for executive. And it doesn't have anything to do with making it simpler, but it has to do with how you present it.
When I think about this, and I want to make an interesting comparison that I think goes off of what you're saying, the difference between shipping containers and Google Translate. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So shipping containers are a good example of an industry standardizing, and everybody saying we're going to do the same thing, and everybody falling in line. A shipping container, if you're not aware, there are standard lengths, heights, widths of a shipping container that all the shipping companies use, and globally they've been able to standardize. It's an incredible effort to standardize, for the most part, on the dimensions of a shipping container. You want to move goods, you plan them for a specific dimension that is the standard, the only way to do it. A very technical, hard governed way of doing things. And one approach to try and make this BPM more transportable is by making everyone conform to standards. But guess what? We tried that, and people still don't want to do that. There is no one standard that I've found that appeals to all the different stakeholder groups and hits them where it matters at a way that gets them to understand it intuitively and to elicit a response in them where they feel compelled to act on it. Let's give the different example of Google Translate. So Google Translate, from what I understand, it's not fully explained to me, but what I understand is that Google Translate sort of translates the semantic meaning of a sentence you put into it into a second machine readable language, and then into the third, your destination language. But you as a user don't see any of that middle ground. Instead, all you see is the easy to understand. Hey, I put in a certain phrase, "Kore wa nan desu ka?" and it says, "Oh, what is this?" Right? I don't see that middle layer. And if BPM by its design, the technical part can be obscured from most people, and on either side are each person's desired format to view the key information, that's a win. You can enter information into it from your own perspective, and it gets harmonized in a machine translatable way without a user having to interfere with that into something that other people can consume in a way that they need to, on a PowerPoint slide, on a wiki, and in a SOP document that is destined for them, or maybe in an architectural view because they want to make specific architectural changes into the organization. But you're not responsible for creating the content in its destination format. You're responsible for creating it or viewing it in a way that makes sense to you. I think that that's a big transition for companies to think about, because that no longer does the interface matter necessarily. It's the intermediate layer that they have to completely obscure through automation, through maybe AI, that makes this something that everyone can see from their perspective and get value from their perspective. Otherwise, they're not going to come to the table.
Yeah, no. That's a tool, JM, right? The tool just brings so much value.
The technology approach that you use to implement that could be any tool, right? But the principle needs to hold fast, which is where I come to the table is valid.
I had a conversation yesterday with a CEO from a tool vendor firm, and he just says, "Look, I look at this from a company management perspective. If I'm the CFO, I have a finite budget that I have to run the company on, right? So now you're coming and tell me you need X amount of dollars for buying this new stuff, right? Why should I pay this, right? Show me the value. The value is not the tool, right? So the question is, how do you articulate the value? Yes, you use the tool, or maybe you don't. The value of the discipline, right? Is it only through case studies, through anecdotal evidence? Is it a more scientific approach? You know, you collect all the saved money through that in whatever, right? Is it through pretty pictures? You know, hey, we finally got everybody. So what is it? What is it that makes the discipline and show the value of the discipline? Because I think if we just focus, as vendors do, we just focus on the damn tool, we're still in the nerd corner.
Yeah.
So Hanneke, I want to ask a little bit about this, because we're talking about all these things that kind of keep people away. And
Yeah.
we're also talking about this from a technical or from a principle perspective, which also I feel maybe keeps people away who are not already in it. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen that has worked or what you see that we should work on about branding BPM. And I think that's a big part of like reaching out across the vast space to a bunch of people who maybe want to become part of it, but don't know even how to get started with understanding what we're doing. So tell me about branding and what you've seen struggle, what you've seen work, what you think we should do.
Yeah, I have a long list in my head. So where shall I start?
just start at the top and go to the bottom.
Well, right in the middle of that list, I think, but which pops up in my mind is now also to educate people about it. Because I'm executive master in finance, and I'm surprised because we talk about internal control and that kind of stuff. And financial people are big stakeholders of BPM. Good processes result in a good month-end closing. So there's your business value for that part of the group. But educate people early on that this is out there. And the rebranding, I already told you. So make it easier to digest. So think differently about value-added change. I love the derivative way of process mapping, but also BPMN. Make it more fun to look at, and not leaving out stuff, but maybe adding. I don't know. Make it easy to digest. What did I wrote on my list? There was a long list. Go outside your bubble, because we are talking to our own bubble. Well, I got the feeling that I already know the whole bubble in these few weeks. Probably not true, but this is a small bubble. But people in the merger and acquisition world should know about it. In the financial world should know about it. In the whatever that is, CSRD is a big stakeholder of value stream mapping, marketing, customer journey mapping. Talk outside your bubble, because now we are the process nerds. Well, it was fun talking to you, but
Thank you for that 45-minute conversation.
We're in the same bubble. I understand. Let's help other people maybe not do the same thing we're doing right now.
So you have to, like, it's that marketing, like it's creating demand. So now I feel like I'm pushing it, and like, you need it, and people like, hell, I don't need it. I have a process, fix it. I'm the fixer. But I don't want to fix. I want to make a sustainable improvement or transition. But they need to grow their demand towards you. So
I get the point. Reaching out into other spaces, combine forces, right? Why are the QM people different than the process people? Why are the UI people different than the whatever, right? So I get that, right? But still, how do you, is it just a communication problem? Is it a thinking problem? Is it we're too entrenched in what we do for the last 100 years problem? So how do you overcome this?
So it's also like communicating about it. So the marketing, rebranding, maybe come up with a different word or slogan, whatever. That's the rebranding definition. I'm very confused about all the definitions that are out there, but okay. Now I'm lost. So that's the rebranding, but also how the things we are doing it. So we need to refine the way of working in BPM. So not being overly enthusiastic, mapping every process that is out there, because you have a big thing to maintain, and that costs a lot of money. So every process I map, I'm thinking ahead, like, okay, but that has to be maintained in the future. So it's either valuable or not. And if it's not, don't do it. So we have to think lean and mean, because that's the sort of a startup mindset that has to enter the BPM field. Don't do things that are not valuable. And we are a bit over
Right.
enthusiastic, like, wow, it's here. Let's do
Well, I tell people
everything.
all the time about that. They say like, why do you want to map processes? And they say, well, because we want to map processes. And I'm like, wait, but like, what are you doing at the end of that? We're going to have mapped processes. It's like,
Yeah.
no. You're trying to solve a problem, right? Like you
Yeah.
need to attach this to some sort of value statement for the organization. Yes, the organization will be better when it has mapped its processes. And I'm like, come on, guys, you got to say something like operational efficiency or like knowledge retention, or you got to say something like, compliance. Like there's got to be a value case. Otherwise,
That's
it's
blah,
just
JM.
self-serving.
It's blah. Show me the
Mhm.
moolah. That's
Mhm.
what you have to do. You have to say, okay, that's great. Yeah, you can be more agile. You can be more efficient and whatnot. If you don't have the proof, right, and you bring and say, hey, I got this firm, and they're willing to speak up and say, oh yeah, because we did this, we progressed or we saved or whatever the benefit is. Hanneke, there's one thing that I really liked. What you also put in our little cheat sheet that obviously nobody will see. You had the term, make it a mystery who you are.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
you were talking about the secret CFO. I like that idea. Can you elaborate on that, please?
So we in finance on LinkedIn, there is a big account. It's called the Secret CFO. And nobody knows who he or she is. And he has 50K followers, but he is posting a lot of valuable stuff out there, and people are loving it. I read it as well, like, oh, that's what I did a few years ago. Now I understand it. But there's a mystery around it. And so can't harm to be a bit of a mystery. So, but again, the financial community, if there is, it's huge. It's never ending. But I can point the usual suspects in the BPM world already. So who will be the mystery BPM?
Oh, so there's no secret.
Oh.
There's no secret anymore because everybody knows it's JM babbling again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can't put my voice on anything because now my voice is too recognizable. And also, I'm doing all these BPM walks, so now everyone recognizes my neighborhood.
Oh,
or
I would recognize you right away. Yeah. No chance.
Well, I love this idea, and I love the idea of bringing it to a larger community of people. Yeah. Hanneke, I'm so glad to hear that you have found this community and maybe mapped it out in its entirety in a relatively short amount of time. I want to put this back out to our audience and leave folks with a bit of a question here. So you're joining us in this podcast because you are also part of that community. But think about all the people you've worked with who aren't part of this, folks who are process tangential or process involved, but don't believe or understand BPM very well. What mechanisms have you used to reach out to them? How have you presented information to them? What sort of response have you received back from them? And what do you think you could do, based off what Hanneke has brought up today, to involve them better in the future of our BPM community together? We'll leave you for a moment to think about that and come back with our final thoughts and conclusions for the episode.
Keep me for tomorrow, 'cause today I'm fine.
And welcome back, Hanneke. I think I said it in the intro of the second segment. Fascinating conversation. I got so many questions, but I also know short on time. This should not be a 3-hour podcast because I know people will drop.
Not again.
That makes me sad, JM. But the biggest question that I have is, because I got your contact info, but how can people reach out to you to continue this conversation, or just have a chat about what you do professionally and all that wonderful stuff?
Well, look me up on LinkedIn to start with. I'm always open for virtual coffees. I'm a professional coffee drinker.
Coffee drinker?
Yeah. Let's have a chat. I'm always curious about other information and knowledges. And you can have a look on my website. It's www.olkama.nl. These are my 3 children reversed before you ask.
And I will put the links in the show notes for those of you who are driving, right? Don't take notes while driving, so you can read them up a little bit later.
But speaking of show notes and speaking of looking at things up later, that's a great cue for me to come on in and remind everyone to go to whatsyourbaseline.com. Yes, all the things you've heard today are reflected in the notes we put up there, as well as a lot of great articles by Roland, including some previews of his upcoming literature that he's writing. My goodness. So if you can go to whatsyourbaseline.com, check in with us. Also, make sure that you're following us on LinkedIn and you're sharing, you're sending other folks our way, commenting, doing all those good things that help with the algorithm, but also help to engage with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Some folks we've had on the show as a result of great conversations engaging with our posts on LinkedIn. So please make sure to drop us a comment, let us know what you thought, and we'd love to keep evolving as we move through season 8 to future seasons of What's Your Baseline. But until we see you on the next podcast, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
And I am Hanneke. I was so happy to be on your show. So, bye-bye.
And my name is Roland Wold.
And we will see you in the next one.